Hello again. This is the third part of our three-part series on moral reasoning. In the last lecture on justification, I said that if you wanted to affect other people or coerce them, you needed to offer them some reasons. I called that set of reasons a justification. In this lecture, I want to take a closer look at what those reasons might look like. There are basically two dominant kinds of moral reasoning in ethics and moral philosophy. These families of moral reasoning, of moral reasons, offer you different yardsticks by which you might measure the persuasiveness of any given justification. Loosely speaking, these are consequentialism on the one hand and deontology on the other hand. Each of these families places the foundation of morality in a different place. Consequentialists say that what justifies action is the good consequences that those actions bring about. Loosely speaking, the ends justify the means. Deontological thinkers, who are not called deontologists for some reason, say just the opposite. What justifies an action is the goodness of the intent or the will of the actor in question. In other words, the ends do not justify the means. Something else does. Specifically, the intent, or in some cases, the structure itself of the action. Now, there are many different flavors of deontology and consequentialism. Consequentialists have to tell you how they measure the goodness of different kinds of consequences. Is pain as bad as boredom? And how do you compare the two, for example? Those who aren't consequentialists have to explain what kind of non-consequentialist reasoning they care about, what kinds of intentions matter, and how the consequences don't matter at all, since intuitively, often many people think that the results do matter. In any case, this gives us two competing sets of justification. This is true in politics just as it is in your personal life. Sometimes they're referred to as the right and the good. Now, these are two very powerful foundations for ethics. Many philosophers find them both elegant and beautiful. They are well developed, they powerfully appeal to our moral intuitions, and yet if one is true, the other cannot possibly be true, and vice versa. So let's talk about consequentialism first. Theories of the good, consequentialist theories, say, look, there are things of positive value in this universe. Things like happiness, perhaps, or pleasure. Actions that produce these things of positive value are good actions. Actions that are motivated by the attempt to produce good things are the right actions. And of course, there are going to be certain character traits that people possess, charity, virtue, courage, and so on and so forth, that tend to produce good things, or actions towards good things. And these character traits we call the virtues. On the other side, theories of the right start with the idea that there are right and wrong reasons for acting. When you act for the right reasons, you must be acting rightly, and when you act for the wrong reasons, you act wrongly. Good acts, whatever results they might have to be acts that resulted from right reasoning, and bad acts are the ones that resulted from wrong reasoning. At the end of the day, there's going to be certain character traits that tend to promote right and wrong reasoning. These are going to be the virtues and the vices, respectively. So, in good-based theories, consequentialist theories that is, the right is derived from the good. The right, we say, is derivative of the good. That means that whatever is right is what produces the good. In right-based theory, it's just the opposite. The good is derivative of the right. Whatever counts as good is just a product of people acting with the right sorts of intentions or motivations. Now, there's going to be a whole lot of conflict between these two theories, and there's going to be various situations that come up that challenge the intuitions that lie behind each of these theories. Let me give you an example. Many deontologically oriented thinkers strongly oppose torture. They say that torture is just inconsistent with respecting the dignity of mankind. It's completely depraved action. It's using somebody for your own ends rather than respecting that they are persons with ends in themselves. Many reasons to oppose torture, but those who favor deontology think that there's just a categorical rule that says, look, no matter what you do in life, you may not torture people. Consequentialists are more doubtful. They respond with examples like, what if the person to be tortured is the only one who knows where the nuclear bomb is that's about to explode, killing hundreds of thousands of people? How can you not torture him if he's refusing to tell you where the bomb is? Now, many consequentialists are also committed to implausible views in different circumstances. Let me give you an example. No one needs a second kidney, but there is always a shortage of kidney donors. Why should the state not put a lottery in place to redistribute kidneys from those who have an extra kidney to those who would die without them? People whose kidneys are failing and who only need a transplant to live 30, 40 extra years of a healthy life. Lives would clearly be saved and nobody would really be hurt. Or why not transfer a very large portion of our incomes to the global poor who are dying of easily preventable diseases and malnutrition? Every day we spend money on luxuries, from potato chips to makeup to handbags, all of which we don't need, and all of which are consuming resources that could be put to saving lives very easily. Either way, whether it be redistribution of kidneys or whether it's the redistribution of money from the very rich in the world to the very poor in the world, the sum of good consequences in the world has to go up. The sum of the good in the world has to go up. So how could this redistribution not be the right thing to do? Now, both consequentialists and deontological thinkers have various ways of trying to wriggle out of these hypothetical problems. But these problems are still problems. They challenge our intuitions, because at the end of the day, consequentialists have to say, well, it's ultimately good consequences that matter, and deontological thinkers have to say, well, ultimately the consequences are clearly not all that matter. At some point, we say they have to bite the bullet. My point is that these approaches conflict, and in order to be consistent, we need to make some hard choices about where we stand, one way or another. Are we, at the end of the day, okay with sacrificing some people for the sake of others and empowering officials to make decisions about who gets sacrificed? Are we okay with not sacrificing people for the sake of others, but thereby allowing terrible consequences to follow when we don't? What do we think of an ethical theory that demands human sacrifice as a basic moral imperative? But then again, what do we think of an ethical theory that allows evil to spread because it won't allow necessary sacrifices to be made? These are really difficult questions, and those are the questions that we're going to debate about all semester. Now, I've emphasized the conflicts to show that these matters are tricky and worth thinking about carefully, but there's also a large amount of overlap between consequentialism and deontology, and so I don't want to overstate the fact that they conflict. If they always conflicted, then we would never be able to do anything. First, both these theories share some common features in terms of their structure, in terms of the way they're organized. Both of them aim to give you rules for action. They're prescriptive. Both of them give you ways of evaluating actions that have already occurred. Both aim to be universal. Both reject the idea that morality is relative to a time and place or a culture. And because they are conflicting, they're kind of hegemonic. So what I want to say is that they share some of these structural features in common, and they also tend to come to the same conclusions more often than they conflict. So in lots of cases, the consequentialist reasoning and the deontological reasoning converge, and so we don't have to feel conflicted. No matter which theory is right, we can do the same thing and feel morally justified in doing so. Now, there is a third theory of moral reasoning that I haven't talked about yet, but that's worth mentioning. We're not going to talk a lot about it in this class, primarily because virtue ethics doesn't have a whole lot to say about politics. It has a lot to say about ethics, but less about politics. We'll be talking about it primarily when we talk about both Plato and Aristotle, but after that, not a whole lot. It doesn't mean it's not important, it just means it's played less of a role in political theory. And this family of moral reasoning is called virtue ethics. Now, virtue ethics does not focus on acts or rules for decision making. It's not as prescriptive, in other words, as deontology or consequentialism. Instead, what it does is it tries to emphasize the development of good character in decision makers. It tries to say, well, in fact, it rejects the idea that there can be hard and fast rules. And one of the reasons it rejects the idea that there can be hard and fast rules, hard and fast prescriptive rules about what to do, is because we come to all these implausible conclusions when we push consequentialism and deontology to their bitter end. So maybe it's not about coming up with rules. Maybe morality is not about rules at all. Maybe it's about developing character. And virtue ethicists focus on developing people's virtues, that is to say, character traits like bravery, like charity, like justice in the sense of giving people their due, respect, all those kinds of virtues that they think will tend to produce the kinds of people who make good decisions. So virtue ethics says very little about what to do in any specific circumstance. In that sense, it leaves a lot of my students unsatisfied. It doesn't tell you what to do with particular laws or policies or decisions. The only time it does say something about those things is when those decisions affect people's character formation. So virtue ethics has a lot more to say about, say, child education than it does about Social Security payments. So instead of looking at specific rules or decisions, virtue ethics is going to try to develop good decision makers by giving them, again, the kinds of character dispositions and virtues that help us balance competing moral considerations. Okay. As I said before, this doesn't substitute for a course on ethics, but I hope this gives you an introduction to the various kinds of moral reasoning that we will be engaging throughout the course. And as always, if you have questions, feel free to get in touch.